The purpose of these roundtables that we have been hosting, speaking about a green and just recovery, is that we are in the pre-budget period. We are beginning, all of us, to think very earnestly about what our recovery should look like, what the essential components of a truly just recovery should look like. And to us in the Green Party, we believe that a guaranteed livable income should be part of that. More and more people do. It is quite extraordinary, the consensus, both across parties and in civil society, that is growing around having a basic income. We call it a guaranteed livable income. We can talk a bit about what the nuances are, but the essentials are the same. And we know that in order to get us across the finish line, educating is a big part of that. There's still a lot of understanding that needs to happen. There's still a lot of information that needs to be shared. And so we have gathered today's guests together to help us do some of that. Alors, l'objectif d'aujourd'hui est très simple. C'est d'éduquer, c'était de rassembler des experts, des militants qui sont là en première ligne pour proposer un revenu minimum garanti, exactement parce que c'est le moment de le faire. Nous sommes dans la pandémie, mais nous sommes déjà en train de considérer quels seraient les éléments clés d'une relance juste, une relance verte. Et notre avis et l'avis de beaucoup de personnes, soit dans les autres partis, soit dans la société civile, c'est que c'est en fait le moment d'introduire un revenu minimum garanti, exactement parce qu'il y a beaucoup de trous, beaucoup de lacunes qui existent encore dans notre filet social. Et un revenu minimum garanti doit être partie de remplir ces lacunes et de éliminer les trous. And so without further ado, I'm going to say a very, very big hello to, and you'll have to tell me how you'd like to address me. I've explained to Senator Pate that my mother raised me a certain way. And so it's Senator Pate, unless I'm invited to say otherwise, and it's
Please just call me Kim.
Okay. And the same applies to the Honorable Senator Segal as well. I only, first names by invitation only. So you let me know.
Hugh is good, Annamie. Hugh.
Okay. Okay. And also, excuse me, Floyd Marinescu from UBI Works. And also Sheila, sorry, excuse me, my voice this morning is failing me a little bit. And we're also thrilled to be joined as well by Sheila Reguer, who is the chair of the Basic Income Canada Network. We've been very lucky to have 3 of our 4 guests with us before. It has been inspiring and, as I said, a real education. So what I'm going to do is just ask each of you if you could just briefly introduce yourselves, and then we're going to just launch right into it. I'm going to ask, and again, in no particular order. Sheila, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Annamie. So I'm Sheila Reguer. I am the chair of the network, as you mentioned. I also have a history as a career federal public servant. So I'm really interested in how we actually get a basic income done. That's one of my key interests. Do you want me to say more?
No, that's perfect. No, that is absolutely perfect. Hugh?
My name is Hugh Segal. I'm at the School of Policy Studies at Queen's University. I had the privilege of serving in the Canadian Senate for 9 years, and also to be chief of staff to a Canadian Prime Minister. I have been advancing the cause for a basic income for decades, and I think that what we've learned during this particular pandemic tells us that the time to move is really now.
Thank you very much. Kim?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kim Pate. I come to you from the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe, and I'm very pleased to join you. The thing that most attracted me to the Senate actually was the opportunity to work on issues like guaranteed livable income, because of the need to address the issues that lead to so many people being in the situations where I was working for the past 40 years, which is with those who are most marginalized, victimized, criminalized, and especially those who are imprisoned.
Thank you. And Floyd.
My name is Floyd Renescu. I'm the CEO of C4 Media. We help software engineers get better at their practice around the world, and also the founder of UBI Works. My interest is in fixing the issues automation is causing on the labor market, which are driving poverty, driving more inequality, and basic income is a key component in a more sustainable future, in my view.
Thank you so much for those introductions, and just launching right into it based on just a couple of things you said, even in those brief introductions. Why is now the time? Why is this the moment? For those of you who have been advocates for a number of years, and certainly pre-pandemic, what are the signs that we need this now? I'm going to start with you, Hugh.
Well, Annamie, it's The Economist, which is not a left-wing magazine, as we all know, just did a detailed analysis of where the world is going economically after COVID. And then they did a special insert on basic income, about which they say the time has come. And their rationale is something with which I agree. Number one, what we learned during the pandemic in Canada, and I do give the government of Canada credit for what they did, liquidity in the hands of people who are living beneath the poverty line is the best possible guarantee of keeping a society and an economy going well. And the CERB and various other initiatives which the government brought in provided that liquidity, which is why we did not have miles of lineups for food banks as our American neighbors did. And now that we look at what an inclusive economy has to look like and how you shape that recovery, we know that we cannot afford to shape a recovery that leaves 10% of the population out, the 10% who now live beneath the poverty line. And we also know, because of other issues that have come to the fore in the last pandemic period, that the vast majority of people who live beneath the poverty line in Canada happen to be either Black or Indigenous or people of color. And they are the ones, generically, those living beneath the poverty line, who have the highest rates of infection, the highest rates of fatality from the pandemic. So the notion that we could go forward and shape an inclusive economic recovery and not do anything for them would make no sense at all. And I would think that there's a broad consensus in the country. The last polls I saw, about 74% of Canadians think it's time. And I think our political parties, wherever they may be on the ideological spectrum, understand the public interest. And I think they're going to be looking for ways to make this happen. And that's why it's time to work very hard to make sure they get a good exposure to why it's important.
Yeah. It just seems that in every day, in every way, as I speak about whatever, housing, about COVID, that the reasons for a basic income become obvious. And just to echo one of the things that you just said, absolutely, it is just striking to me the as you said, the people that have been particularly impacted and who could be particularly helped by a guaranteed livable income. Senator, see, old habits die hard. Kim, Kim, why, to your mind, is this the time? Why is the time now?
Well, I agree with everything that Senator Segal, Hugh, just said. And I'd say that, too many of the folks who are here in Ottawa don't understand what that looks like. The level of privilege to not to do the incredible work that was done during this period, produce CERB, but still ignore 1 in 10 means you either are doing it purposely or you're ignorant of it. And it's pretty clear to me that in most cases, it's not people being mean-spirited. It really is a lack of awareness of just how this impacts, that 90% of the people in this country who are working in minimum wage jobs cannot afford to rent a 1-bedroom apartment, or sorry, in 90% of the communities in this country. The fact that we have steps from Parliament Hill, homeless shelters where personal support workers, as Hugh said, many of them racialized, many of them women, who are living in homeless shelters while they're working full time in long-term care facilities. How can that be? How can we continue on and ignore these realities? And so I think there's ample evidence. It's also, what a great year it would be to do it. The 50th anniversary of the Kroll Report, which is a Senate report that introduced the idea of a basic income, in the wake of the Senate Finance Committee, as well as the House of Commons Finance Committee recommending this. And as we're heading into a recovery that we know will disproportionately impact women. And so the argument that Minister Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister, is using is that we need a she recovery. Well, what better than providing an assurance that people will have the resources to be able to have housing, to feed their children, to clothe their children, and to provide opportunities for education. And we're increasingly, as as Floyd and Sheila, I'm sure we'll talk about, looking at situations where we don't know when this pandemic will end, and we don't know when the next labor interruption will happen for all kinds of people. And so this has laid bare some issues for people, but many of us knew these situations were happening for many years, and it's been a lifetime of working for you, for Hugh, for everybody on this call, of trying to address these issues. And now the Canadian public knows, now the Canadian government knows, now it's time to act.
Picking up on that, Sheila, we do have, as Hugh mentioned, we have this suite of emergency benefits. But of course, those are time limited. And of course, the creation of them was a recognition in and of itself that there was something missing. When those run out without a replacement like a guaranteed livable income, what can we imagine? And picking up on perhaps Kim's point about let's say a feminist recovery. I mean, what if without this, what can we expect?
I really have a hard time thinking about that, because I think it's really dire. I mean, I think a lot of people have this strange idea that as soon as everybody gets vaccinated, things are going to just pop back up again and we're all going to be fine. One of the things that I think is really pertinent to this conversation is the movement that the basic income movement is making towards the intersection with climate change. So we might beat this COVID thing, but we're not going to beat climate change that fast, that's for sure. So the same problems are going to continue to plague us. And as we go forward, if we really are going to have a just green recovery, we look at the income part of this as being like, you have income security that can either, it's sort of an enabler or a generator for community resilience. So either you have that and it reinforces everything and allows you to move forward, or it acts as a barrier that makes it almost impossible to do anything without it. Because you can't get people to change. You can't get people to do the things that need to be done to recover in lots of ways and to have a fairer, better society unless people have that grounding. The other thing that I thought was interesting to add to the why now kind of issue, if I may, because I agree with everything that Kim and Hugh said, of course. One of the things that really struck me was an announcement today that came out about a new report, and they took off on the kind of spring theme and the idea that it's time for green shoots and new ideas. And my reaction was, stop it. We have tried all those things. Look under your nose. Just look under your nose at what we've already got, at what's there, and do it. This search for all of these new things when you don't want to look at what's there and what's been working, it just amazes me, and not in a good way. But, the time is now, and we do have the means to do this.
Just picking up on that, the time is now theme, and it's true. Why reinvent the wheel? I'm a big believer in that, by the way, Sheila. No need to reinvent the wheel when the good solutions are out there. I'm a big believer in that. Floyd, we know you mentioned that your area of particular interest is the impact of automation and artificial intelligence. And we know that both of those, let's say, structural changes have only accelerated throughout the pandemic. So in the same way, given that acceleration, given that that was already something that was a reason to introduce a universal basic income, where are we now? What has happened over the past year that makes it even more necessary?
Well, I want to contrast this to a story of a previous crisis that we'd had. My father and uncle were among millions of people in manufacturing sector in North America whose jobs were lost due to sudden income loss in that industry when China became a major and sudden competitor in the early 2000s. What happens when industries are forced with a sudden loss of income is they automate. They automate to survive. They try and do more with less, just like anybody would. And we've seen the same thing happen at every crisis. After 2008, we haven't even recovered yet from that. Just before the COVID crisis, lower income workers were still worse off in more debt and living more check to check than ever before. Before the COVID crisis, estimations were that 42% of the tasks Canadians do at work could be automated by existing technologies. And guess what? Technology is cheaper than workers. There are robotic arms you can buy for less than the cost of a minimum wage worker right now. And what we're seeing right now is an acceleration of all these trends. We're seeing the deployment of warehouses backing Sobeys and Walmart that don't have any people in them. If you walk into local McDonald's, you're seeing mostly kiosks with just one person behind the cash register. It's been happening in banking for many years, and the COVID crisis has given many companies the excuse to do mass layoffs and then replace them with software that they were thinking of hiring and of using, and no reason to hire those people back. So that's why there's some estimations in the US have been predicting that 40% of the jobs lost will never come back. And the pattern we've seen over the last several decades of impact of automation is simply polarization of the labor market, the middle class shrinking, and more low income jobs and low quality jobs primarily replacing them. So we're effectively moving to a two-tiered society with a shrinking middle class, a giant underclass that is taking whatever they can get, often Uberized jobs that have no benefits. And frankly, I think basic income is the only way, that the first step in addressing this, so people can buy time out of poverty and precarity to pursue their potential, to pursue better jobs, better education. Without it, we're just dooming ourselves to being on the permanent hamster wheel of trying to live check to check and increasingly in debt. There's simply no other way. You can't get a re-education if you don't have the time and means to pursue it first. Basic income is how we do that.
Let's talk about that now that we've talked about why it's necessary. What would it mean to people? What could they do? What would Canada look like in your minds after the creation of a guaranteed livable income? Let's try to paint a picture for people. Hugh, what would it look like?
Well, here's the good news. Based on the studies that have been done in Dauphin, Manitoba, and other countries, here's what you would find. First of all, the quality of people's life in terms of their health would improve substantially. Poverty is sadly a very accurate predictor of bad health outcomes. So if you visit an emergency ward anywhere in Canada today, there'll be a whole bunch of people who are there who are not there because of some traumatic event, car accident or whatever. They're there because a chronic disease has acted up. They have nowhere else to go. And so we know that the low income people, poor people, get sick sooner, go to hospital earlier, stay in hospital longer, all of which have huge implications for the tax base that we're all trying to manage in the public interest. So first of all, our population would be healthier. Secondly, the amount of kids who do better in school would increase because poverty is a very serious predictor of bad educational outcomes for the kids. Kids could stay in school longer. Kids could develop more of the skill sets they're going to need to compete in the world that Floyd described so accurately. The other thing we would see, and I think this is really, really important, you would see a whole new level of vitality in our communities. All the studies that have been done, whether it was recently in Hamilton or other parts of Canada or in other parts of the world, show that people who knew that whatever happened, they would have enough to get by, if they lost their job or not, had time to contribute to the community, to volunteer, to be more involved, to vote to be part of the system. And that, of course, is a revitalizing proposition for all of the country. You wouldn't have 10% of the population for whom their nose is pressed up against the glass of an economy that everybody else is doing okay in. They would have a chance to participate as well. Some would go for more education. Some would use that base. This was the case in the pilot in Ontario to pick up some entrepreneurial skills and in fact start some businesses. So it would be a revitalizing proposition. And the economics report that Floyd's people were good enough to commission from CanCIA was very clear. It said there would be a net increase in the gross domestic product over time because we were dealing with poverty straight on. So the benefits are very substantial for the whole economy, not just for those who are beneath the low income line. And it would be completely affordable in terms of the general growth and direction of our economic GDP.
Again, I'm convinced. It is, Kim, just maybe I would love to hear if there's anything that Hugh missed. I mean, that was very comprehensive. Again, in terms of educating people about a guaranteed livable income, I always feel that it's important to emphasize that that inaction is not cost-free when we talk about the cost of this. And so, if you could paint the same picture and maybe just address that as well.
Sure. Well, again, I agree with everything Hugh has just said, and add that it also contributes to lower crime rates, lower victimization rates. And, our jails are full of people, in addition to being racialized. And when we look at women in particular, they're the fastest growing prison population, particularly Indigenous and Black women and those with mental health issues. And yet when we think of public safety, we're not talking about hordes of women who have struggled with past trauma, who are, struggling to try and negotiate those realities. And so we could actually be providing opportunities. And when I was up north meeting with folks, and well, not just up north, but in a number of Indigenous communities, I heard from a number of the leaders and the elders in particular that something like a guaranteed livable income, a basic income, would provide opportunities for people who are on social assistance now, so they can't go out on the land, they can't go hunt, they can't go learn languages, they can't participate in the kinds of educational opportunities that Hugh spoke about as well, because in order to collect that assistance, they're supposed to stay in place looking for non-existent jobs in their communities instead of being able to further develop in educational ways, in cultural ways, in ways that contribute to the community. And so I think those are opportunities we need to look at. And a group of women I think they're out of Winnipeg, but it was a group of women who did a study on what it actually takes to stay poor. And it's full-time work. It's 12 hours a day of trying to negotiate inhospitable systems, from the food bank to the social assistance office to wherever else they have to go to try and get the meager bits that they are given. And it's exhausting, and it's soul destroying, and it doesn't contribute to them, to their children, or to us as to the country or the community at large. And certainly, so in addition to all the economic issues, there are all these realities in terms of human cost. And in some of the international meetings that I've had the privilege of participating in the last few months, it's interesting, in particular, the women leadership who are talking about wanting to look at a new measure for for recovery, not just the GDP, but also looking at human development indexes and the well-being indexes. And so I hope that we're moving in that direction, and basic income would help us get there as well.
Absolutely. I'm just going to ask Sheila and Floyd as well about that. And maybe again just to add another layer, because I think every time we have a conversation like this, it's always important to address the misconceptions or the elephants in the room. And of course, one of them is about the disincentive that a guaranteed livable income might create. So, and particularly, unfortunately, because of the kind of stigma that is attached to low-income people and racialized people as well, the presumptions about what this might do to disincentivize work. So as we paint the picture about what the future could look like with a guaranteed livable income, what do we say to those who say that this is a tremendous disincentive for people to go out and work? Sheila.
Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. You're quite right. There's no evidence that supports that whatsoever. I also think, like, when I look at a future with a basic income, I see ways in which people work really, really differently because they have the options to do that. And you might find that society just ends up looking an awful lot happier and more mellow, and a lot of the tensions that divide people and create fear and create this sense of the other as being somebody else. If we're all part of a same system that doesn't stigmatize, that, you know, recognizes that everybody has a human right to a basic income and a basic livelihood and the ability to participate in society and the economy, we might just see a society develops that puts more attention towards caring for people who care for each other, for people who care for the planet, for people to do creative things, for people to not have to go to stupid jobs that really aren't contributing anything, but have the capacity to create an economy that actually functions much better for everybody.
Lloyd, do you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I'll add, we need better jobs. The recent study from the Canadian Centre of Economics Analysis showed that a guaranteed livable income could create 300,000 jobs within 5 years. This additional stimulus, starting from the bottom up, would trigger more hiring and would create more job opportunities for people. On the earlier question about what kind of society will we have, well, we have a society with a bigger middle class, with more innovation and more entrepreneurship. In 2018, I organized 120 Canadian CEOs to endorse basic income, and a quarter of them said that entrepreneurship should not be the domain only of children of wealthy people. And recently, Statistics Canada issued a report showing that income mobility, social mobility, is at an all-time low, meaning you're more likely to stay within the circumstances in which you were born. That's just not fair. I mean, I think equality of opportunity is a key desire, of a key aspiration for Canadians. And a basic income would allow everyone the chance to pursue their potential, to pursue new businesses, new ideas, retrain for better jobs. And that's the kind of society, frankly, I love to work in. And over the long term, increasing innovation is the only thing that increases productivity and enhances everyone's standard of living. So it's really crucial that we unlock people's ability to take risks, which is at an all-time low when half the country is living check to check, and it seems to be getting worse with every passing decade.
So with all of this in mind, how do we get from here to there? How quickly do you think we can do this? What are the excuse me, who are the actors that need to be involved? What are the intermediate steps to get us from here to there? I think that there are also those who are attracted to the idea, but have a hard time imagining how we put the pieces of the puzzle together in practical terms. So given your expertise in that as well, I would love to know how you see, if we decided today, this is an ambition we have as a country, how long do you think it would take and what would we need to do, Kim?
Well, I think we as we've seen with CERB, the government could pivot very quickly. And as the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance indicated in the speech from the throne, or as they've indicated, they want to go to an automatic tax filing system. Those two alone tell us that we're on the brink of being able to do this, if not already here. And we have PEI indicating, the Premier of PEI and the province wants to proceed. So we could pilot implementation, not have a new pilot project, but pilot the implementation of this in PEI in much the way Medicare started in Saskatchewan. And I suspect, and you know, certainly those of you who have worked on this much longer than me can confirm that I suspect once it rolls out, everybody will want to be part of it, because as you've already mentioned, this is an international discussion that's happening, and Canada was seen as a leader in Medicare. We should also be a leader in this, and we can be a leader in this. And I think the time is well past due, but you know, I'm happy if we start now.
Yes. I as well. Hugh, what's what does it, as you know, please apply your strategist mind to this. What, and I would just maybe, you know, in terms of course, there's always the policy side, the mechanics. There's also the political side as well. What would it look like? What should it look like?
Well, let me just say that in a minority parliament, with a government that has to get support from more than one political party to get its budget through, there is a tremendous opportunity, because we seem to have a few weeks yet until the budget comes out, for parliamentarians of all political affiliations. And to be fair, the Green Party has been on this file in support longer than everybody else, for which they deserve immense credit, to make it perfectly clear to the Minister of Finance that whatever else her priorities may be in the coming budget, if she's going to have a better recovery, if we're going to build back better, then there are various parties in the House of Commons that are going to be counting on a solid step forward on basic income. The Minister of Finance has a whole bunch of ways she can do this. I'm very much of the view that a national program like the Guaranteed Income Supplement for seniors, like the child benefit, which is run by the federal government, would be liberating in a host of ways. First of all, we all remember that the premiers have now said twice that they want from Ottawa $28 billion, new dollars every year to sustain their healthcare systems. The provinces are now spending $32 billion every year on welfare programs which are inadequate and which are in some ways very punitive to the recipients. As was said earlier by Kim, you know, if you're a welfare recipient in most Canadian provinces, you're earning from welfare less than half the poverty line. And if you try to find extra work to get more cash, you earn more than a couple $100 a month, you're going to have your basic welfare actually clawed back dollar for dollar. It's a powerful disincentive to work. The basic income is the opposite. It encourages people to work and to generate as much income as they can, with the tax system capturing as needs be as the income goes up. So that's a tremendous opportunity for the minister to say, we're prepared to deal with that $28 billion demand by bringing in a national program which allows all the provinces to collapse their welfare cash transfer in favor of a federal cash transfer. And as everybody who listens to this knows, there's only one taxpayer. We all pay municipal tax or federal tax or provincial tax. So what's saved in one place is a benefit in the other. That's the way I think we can proceed. And I think, you know, minority governments have been a source of some very, very good public policy over the years. And the opportunity to push in that direction now, I think, is very real and very compelling.
Particularly with what really seems to be a growing cross-party consensus around this as well. I'm hoping that all of you in your roles as advocates are working with the Liberal caucus, who seems very, very interested in some form of guaranteed livable income. This should be something that we should be able to come together to do in the way that we have, as you said, minority parliaments in the past, to do some of our most extraordinary work on social programs. I think Floyd and Sheila, I hadn't come to you yet about this. How do we get it done in practical and political terms?
I think politically, we need to have an honest discussion with middle income people about the impacts automation and these structural changes in the economy are having on them. Ultimately, they need to be on side with the vote. And we need to have a discussion about how the economy is changing and making life worse for lower income and middle income peoples. And we need to talk about the impacts of automation. We need to talk about labor market polarization, perhaps even mention the word fourth industrial revolution, because that does encapsulate everything that's happening, as well as an honest discussion about who should pay for it, so it falls less on middle income workers. I think that's what's going to be needed to get this last mile towards a basic income.
Sheila?
Yeah, I want to build on what both Kim and Hugh said. Kim wants to start today. As Hugh said, we actually started yesterday, a long time ago. We have all of the ingredients in place. We've had them for seniors and for families with children running for a long time. We've got these models that we know work. And then, as Kim said, with SERVE, it showed us we're developing this far more sophisticated capacity to be more responsive to people's changes in income that suits a working age population better than it does seniors. We've advanced a tremendous amount. So we've got all of these things in place. The other sort of issue I would mention is what happened around the development of child benefits. And it's what is being recommended in a way, I think, by Bill C-273 that's being put forward now, is that you have to have a structure that brings the provinces together and other stakeholders. So you sit down, you decide what this thing looks like. I agree with you. I don't know why provinces wouldn't be chomping at the bit to come to the table to talk about this. Nobody likes welfare. And that system, plus all of the other gaps and inadequacies we have in our income security system, is creating problems. We keep coming to the provinces and territories and municipalities come to the federal government for money to fix problems that they're creating. So Mayor Tory in Toronto needs money for gun violence. The problem is not gun violence. The problem is neighborhoods that have no income. So, we have this incredible array of factors that argue in our favor. We have motion 46 that tells us what this thing needs to look like for this population. We've got our history, we've got experience, we've got a great tax system that can do these things. We need to get people at the table with a mandate to sit down and do it. Just get it done. And I would add, in the meantime, because this will, in realistic terms, it will take a little bit of time to work this out with provinces. But in the meantime, the federal government has incredible levers. It has all kinds of cash programs that it rolls out that have conditions that don't need to be there. Take the conditions off, take the delays off of things, roll the money out to people who need the income. You're building a basic income already by doing that.
And as the last thought, when I speak about these things, because we still are in this pandemic, this extraordinary moment, and we're still going to be in this for a while. Yesterday, we spoke about yet another looming hole that is putting a lot of people at risk, which are rental arrears. We seem to be running around trying to plug these holes individually when what is needed is really a holistic solution. In the case of rental arrears, that is a looming crisis. There have been various moratoriums that have either ended or are coming to an end, and the level of evictions are just accelerating, and there are many thousands of people in very serious rental arrears. And so we proposed an emergency benefit for that. And so we keep creating these emergency benefits, these stopgap measures. I would say that until we arrive, my last question to you all would be, until we arrive at the moment that we do have a guaranteed livable income, which of these existing benefits need to remain in place at least through the pandemic, and then afterward? Do we need to now, would you all be recommending that the CRB, for instance, remain in place indefinitely? All of these things are time limited, and there isn't anything to replace them as of yet. Hugh, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my view would be that the benefits that are now in place that were brought in for short-term purposes should be left in place until such time as there is a basic income to replace all of them, and probably on a much more efficient and less expensive way. That's the kind of transition I think the country would believe in. We are seeing employment coming back. We are seeing parts of the economy coming back, all of which is good, but that does nothing for the 10% who live beneath the poverty line, who lived beneath the poverty line before the pandemic, who have lived beneath the poverty line during the pandemic, and will be living beneath the poverty line after the pandemic, unless something is done to change those numbers. So I would not be for doing away with the short-term benefits until such time as the province or the federal government has either announced a federal program to fill the gap, or they've come to agreement with the provinces for that to be in place. And I think it's only fair because, quite frankly, if you can't pay your rent, you're not going to have enough money for food for your kids. And if your kids don't have enough food, they're not going to do very well in school. And you get that cycle, which is self-generating and really, really problematic for all of us as Canadians.
Does everyone agree with that? Is there any? Yes.
I
Kim?
do, but there's still also, I mean, I spent most of the holiday period after a message went out from the Prime Minister that if you were getting CERB payback letters, don't worry about it, don't get anxious about it. Well, people were really anxious, and rightly so. A whole bunch of people got cut off social assistance, in particular disability payments. And so we have this growing group of people who are not just still struggling in poverty, as Hugh has mentioned, but it's a deeper, more entrenched poverty, and one where right now there's a number of them who aren't even eligible for the criminally low social assistance rates that do exist, because they've been not just had the money clawed back, but been kicked off because they were either it was intimated that they did something wrong. The most people, if you claimed for CERB and you got it and then you were found not eligible, I mean, lots of people, there's discussion of it being forgiven. The people who most, I would argue, in many ways, most needed some additional monies are being not just punished. The CERB isn't being forgiven, but they're actually, all income is being taken away from them. And so, numbers of us are trying to figure out how to patch that together. I'm probably not the only one who's taken from my own pocket, and I'm in a privileged position. I'm glad I can do that, but not everybody can, and not everybody's families and circles and communities can do that. So I think we need that and more. And the evidence from the parliamentary budget officer about the costs of what these are going to be going forward, I think should provide added impetus for us to pivot as quickly as we can to, and rightly Sheila corrected me, to continue on with the expanding the existing guaranteed livable income initiatives, basic income initiatives that we already have.
You really have touched on something there. I mean, I have to say, I feel almost like Sisyphus, or pushing that stone up the hill, and you think, okay, now we've arrived at a place where everybody is covered in some way, even with this patchwork system. And then you realize, actually, no. I mean, I will say that for my part, that of course you're vaguely aware, but the scale, for instance, of the rental arrears crisis and the risk that so many low income vulnerable communities are now in is something that I was not fully aware of until recently, and it is not covered by any of this, even with these benefits. And so it just becomes clearer and clearer that a piecemeal system really is always going to leave people out. There's always going to be that exception. We all have our different circumstances, and this is really where that comes in. I'm just going to let Sheila, I was going to come to you, and Floyd as well. We're just wrapping up now, but any comments about this? And I saw the heads nodding when Hugh said we should keep these benefits in place, but if you wanted to add any final thoughts, please, Sheila.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, you keep in place what's working and you learn as we go. CERB has flaws and it left people out. You need to deal with that. You can't just keep running CERB and not do anything else. You do need to fill these things in, and you need to move as quickly as possible to consolidate things. One of the recent report that came out highlighted that in some cases people had 192 different programs to deal with. That is time wasting. It is demoralizing that you can't function in a world like that. And everything else around us is so complex as well now. So the idea of streamlining and making everything fairer has to be a key objective in anything the federal government does now and on a permanent basis. So I think that's really important. I wanted to just mention just very, very quickly, a couple of other things that strike me, both for women and for youth. There was a recent report that Statistics Canada has shown that the death rate amongst youth is significantly higher than can be accounted for by COVID. And they're saying they don't know why. Maybe it's the opioid crisis. And I'm thinking, like, the opioid crisis isn't the cause. It's a symptom. So we've got these generations of people we're leaving behind. We've got women, we've got Black and brown people. Like, if we don't fix this really soon, the people that we really need in our society are being left behind, and we need to move.
Thank you, Sheila. Floyd, any last thoughts?
The need for a basic income will only intensify. I think in a few years, we're going to see the impact of the rapid automation that has been caused by this pandemic, which accelerates trends. The previous recovery was called a jobless recovery. It took almost 10 years to reach the employment levels that we had. And even then, most people were not better off. In a few years, we're going to be seeing self-driving trucks, self-driving cars. We're going to see it, and people are going to see it right in front of them. And the kind of suffering that people are experiencing right now with being underemployed, underemployment being a major issue that is happening in Western economies, also linked to automation, is just going to become an unbearable crisis. And so I think, poverty for most should not be the future that people can hope for. People need hope, and I think basic income at this time will provide the long-term security for people to hope and aspire to something better.
Absolutely, and I think that's an excellent note for us to end on today. And though this first to say that this is an ongoing conversation. This is something that we are very committed to. We believe, as you do, that the time absolutely is now. That there is a growing, thanks to the work that all of you have done, a growing consensus around this. And it is a key element that we have got to be talking about for the post-pandemic recovery, absolutely. And so I wanted just to say thank you very much for not only explaining why it is needed, but how we can get there, who will benefit, and why this really is, as Floyd said, and all of you have said in different ways, it's something that is quite hopeful, something that can generate a great deal of hope for the future. And I do agree that is something that is very much needed now. I especially want to thank you for just the practical ideas. There are many things that I have experienced many times where we've been told that these things are idealistic. Yes, it would be nice in all things being equal, but it is just simply not doable. And so having all of you explain how it is doable and how we can, as I said, get from here to there is, I think, a very, very important part of the discussion. So we will be seeing you all again. Thank you very much. We are going to continue speaking about guaranteed livable income. We will always be ready to work with whomever is in support of this. I would love, for instance, to see a cross-party coalition come together to speak about how we get this done. It would be exactly what is needed, and we know that it would accelerate our progress. So if we can do that within the life of this parliament, I think that would be extraordinary. And as you all said, it is doable. So thank you very, very much. Merci à tout le monde d'être ici avec nous aujourd'hui. Nous allons, comme toujours, entamer de faire une autre session en français aussi. Mais juste pour dire que c'était vraiment, vraiment utile d'avoir cette discussion, d'avoir un plan d'action de comment arriver à notre objectif de créer une revenu minimum garanti et qui seront les bénéficiaires et pourquoi le moment est maintenant de le faire. Merci d'être avec nous aujourd'hui. Thank you so much to our guests again. Very grateful for your time as always, and we look forward to our next discussion. And with that, we are going to say goodbye to those who've joined us on Facebook. If our guests could just hang on for 1 second afterward. Rosie, over to you. Thank you so much, everyone. Merci d'être ici avec nous aujourd'hui.